Good evening to you and welcome to the program. Tonight, a mother's courage. Marlise Burden was there on the family sheep station when her son Michael fled from a police interrogation and took his own life after the disappearance of his wife Tanya Ebert. So what is the truth of this love affair that went so wrong, and how did it descend into such tragedy? Mark Mooney reports.
He wanted his daddy. Please turn around. I need you, Daddy. I love you, Daddy.
As you know, Tanya Ebert's been missing since Tuesday, the 8th of August 2017, and is presumed to have been murdered. The last independent sighting of Tanya...
This is a family tragedy that shocked and saddened an entire state. The hard-working farmer and his young German wife, their two beautiful boys, and a breathtaking outback sheep station.
There were all these plans and all these dreams, and it just didn't work somehow.
The first we heard was that Michael Burden's wife Tanya Ebert had mysteriously disappeared. Then came the urgent dash by major crime detectives to their sprawling property, followed by this shock disclosure.
During the course of the afternoon, police momentarily lost sight of Michael, and then very shortly after heard a muffled gunshot.
So this is Michael?
And he was still at the Yunta school, although I think that was his last year.
Michael's mother, Marlise Burden, was there at the time of her son's death. Now all she has to remember him by are the family photos, those and memories of a happy little boy despite some challenges early in life.
He was severely dyslexic, so that made his life so much harder and school life so much harder.
Throughout childhood, he leaned on his brother Mark for help. They were thick as thieves.
And I think a lot of he did have problems, and I think they can be taken back to the time his brother died, because they were so close.
So what happened to Mark?
He died, suicide at 19. So this is a double whammy.
In the years that followed, Michael spent more time helping his father Peter run the family's Manor Hill sheep station in the state's far northeast. But in 2014, he lost his father too, after a long battle with a brain tumour.
When his father died, he knew he had the responsibility of the station.
Not long before his father died, Michael had found love with a young German backpacker named Tanya Ebert. They met in a country pub where she worked. She was 18 years his junior.
She was very young, whimsical.
Michael was instantly smitten. After a whirlwind courtship, they had their first child, Oscar. Tanya loved life on the land, and the two of them appeared to have a perfect future ahead.
And they did it together. And she was supposed to do the books because he found that really difficult. Tanya wasn't very good at doing the books. So you can't blame her for that. It's just, she was very good with the stock and the station work. And that probably was, in Michael's eyes, that was enough.
After welcoming their second son, Charlie, Michael and Tanya were married at an intimate ceremony in February this year. The grandeur of the country station was a fitting backdrop to their romantic union. To their friends, they appeared to be head over heels.
Very, very, very loving couple.
But in truth, they were already drifting apart. Just 2 months after the wedding, Tanya raised eyebrows when she left Michael and the kids at home and travelled to the Bahamas for a friend's wedding.
I was very surprised that that happened straight after the wedding and without Michael. And then I realised that the situation was quite serious. And I think for her it was a trial period of being away. She'd fallen out of love with Michael.
She also went home to Germany, telling her mother Andrea their marriage was on the rocks.
I don't think Mum was surprised at how things went, because I think Tanya had already asked her how to get a divorce, so she knew.
But she could never have imagined the terrible twist that was just around the corner.
And this is a tragic outcome that nobody wanted.
This is the last time Tanya was seen alive, leaving the museum on North Terrace with Michael and the boys. What happened next may never be known. Michael told police they had a fight on their way home. He said Tanya got out of the car at Roseworthy and stormed off. Police suspected he was lying, convinced they had returned to their property that night and that Michael killed Tanya before burying her body.
He was totally distraught and vulnerable. He was all over the place.
8 days after Tanya's disappearance, police ramped up their investigation, launching a search at Roseworthy. At the same time, a team of major crime detectives from Adelaide converged on the Burdens' property.
He was guilty straight away. And I can still see the men running after them, and I'm sure they had their pistols drawn. It was just like cowboys.
Now, when police arrived at the Manor Hill property run by her son Michael, Marliese was there caring for her 2 grandchildren. Their mother, Tanya, had been missing for 8 days and their father was suddenly the focus of a murder investigation. Mark Mooney continues the story.
They didn't even come and introduce themselves to me or say hello or this is what we're going to do.
Michael Burden's mother, Marliese, had been on the Manor Hill station for several days, helping Michael look after the boys following Tanya's disappearance. It was the 16th of August when detectives arrived unannounced.
They were suddenly there, closeted themselves in the kitchen with Michael, and then I saw Michael every now and then looking really pale, pasty, very unhappy.
She quickly realised Michael was a suspect, the only suspect in Tanya's disappearance. She says as far as detectives were concerned, he was guilty.
They treated him like an animal. Once he talked to his lawyer, they turned the recorder off and then said, I believe, that now we're going to search Alina Park. We're going to dig up Alina Park. And at that stage, I think he lost it.
What happened next will haunt her for the rest of her days.
They were all outside discussing I don't know what when he said he needed to go to the toilet. And he left, somehow managed to get a gun and ammunition, ran further away from the station, and then somebody heard a muffled shot. We didn't hear the shot.
Paramedics scrambled to the scene, but there was nothing they could do.
And then it was all over. And the policeman came in and said, sorry to have to tell you like this, but your son is dead. But that was the most horrible thing.
A commissioner's inquiry was launched.
It's fair to say that the actions of my branch and all the attending police will be closely examined in the commissioner's inquiry.
So how did Michael get access to a gun? He's the prime suspect in a murder.
Exactly. How did he get access to anything? A gun that with ammunition. And maybe a duty of care wouldn't be a bad thing, rather than to go in there guns blazing.
Then came the grim search for Tanya's body.
Everybody wants to find Tanya and everybody wants to know exactly what happened.
But on a property twice the size of Mount Gambier, that was never going to be easy.
If Michael had hidden the body, nobody would find it. He knew the station, every stone on the station.
A massive search party was assembled from across the state. Horses, motorbikes, even a mine expert was called in to check old wells and mine shafts on the property. But after 6 days of searching, still no sign of Tanya. Marliese Burden says police left behind a costly mess.
Like an invasion. No, they ripped up roads, they twisted piping, water piping. Has anybody cleaned up after the chaos that they created and the damage? For instance, big machinery was left without fuel and then had to be bled in order to be able to, and by a mechanic, in order to sort of be able to be worked again.
Frustratingly for police, Michael gave no clues nor admissions before he died.
Do you think Michael killed Tanya?
I know there are crimes of passion where people are so, feel so deeply that they forget, that they act in haste or whatever. I don't think he was that type of person, although he was very, very upset. I can't understand it. I don't believe it. I think she may still be there somewhere. I think she's run away.
Friends say she'd never leave her sons like this. Oscar and Charlie are now living with family friends on a station similar to the one they've been growing up on. Their grandmother prays they're too young to remember what happened the day their father died.
We managed to bundle them up. The most horrible drive because Oscar screamed for half the trip, wanting his daddy. He wanted his daddy. Please turn around. I need you, Daddy. I love you, Daddy. It was just... Maybe I'm doing my grieving now.
Such an awful tragedy, and police won't comment as several inquiries are underway. Mark Mooney with that report. Now, that stunning new lead in the decades-old Beaumont case. As you would have seen in the news, a chilling video of a suspect has surfaced less than a week after his death. Now, members of Max McIntyre's own family are convinced their father was involved in Jane, Anna and Grant's disappearance and that they know where the children are buried. Here's Mark Mooney with the details.
I know a lot about the Beaumont killing.
Put it to him directly, you know, were you involved, Max? He said, no, I wasn't, but I'll tell you who was.
My father was involved in the abduction and murder of the Beaumont children.
Could this man hold the key to Australia's greatest criminal mystery?
How did you come to track me down?
Inside his home on a remote property on York Peninsula, Max McIntyre opens up about the allegations that have dogged him for much of his life.
At the moment I'm researching the death of the Beaumonts because the only person that had to clear my name was me.
This never-before-seen interview, filmed in April 2015, is the only time he broke his silence. On Tuesday, Max died aged 89 and, according to his son Andrew, has taken the 50-year-old secret to his grave.
Exactly how much of a part he played, I'm not sure, but he was a major player in that. He disposed of the bodies.
While his father denied any involvement, he claims there was someone who may know what happened. That person is his one-time close friend, Scout leader Anthony Munro.
I want the whole bloody mess looked at. Now, I'll get around to who killed the Beaumonts in a minute.
Andrew first raised his own suspicions in a court case in 2008 after Max took out an injunction blocking he and his sister from entering his property. Since then, he's had trouble finding anyone who would listen to what he told the court about his father and Munro.
Now you want to know about Tony Munro.
Trying to tease the story out of him was investigative journalist Brian Littley.
We all hold hope that the Beaumont case can be solved, but I guess for me, I'm driven a little bit by the fear that I might actually have something that if I don't pass it on, it won't be solved.
Tony Munro had close relationships with numerous children through his scouting activities and a skin diving club he ran at Glenelg. It was around the time that Jane, Anna and Grant Beaumont disappeared from the same beach. It was Australia Day 1966. Andrew McIntyre remembers that day like it was yesterday.
Our father told us he'd take us to the beach, but he changed his mind and left us home.
He says when his father and Munro returned, they were agitated and upset, and there was sand and blood in Munro's car.
The children were in the boot of his white Zephyr. My two sisters were taken to the boot and my sister had to brush the blood out of their hair and sand out of their hair.
His father never told him what had happened and how the children came to be in the boot of the car.
Andrew McIntyre claims that 2 weeks after the Beaumonts disappeared, Munro drove him from Adelaide to his father's property here in Stansbury. He says he dropped him in the driveway and sped off. As Andrew walked towards the house, he noticed something had changed. The sinkhole at the back of the property had been filled in.
Anthony Munro brought me over to Stansbury to point me in that direction to see that the well had been filled in.
The reason he was given?
A flock of sheep had run down it, the sheep that lived on the property for years.
He's convinced the Beaumonts are buried there and believes the authorities have an obligation to dig it up.
My father liked to have his victims close handy, and he was a very cruel man, and I've always been terrified of him. I have constant nightmares about my father.
In 1990, Munro was jailed for abusing a child and later fled to Cambodia, where he ran ladyboy bars.
Police are looking at 2 possible victims. They are all under the age of 15 years old.
With the authorities there on his tail, he returned to Adelaide last year and pleaded guilty to the abuse of 2 more boys in 1965. One of those boys was Andrew McIntyre.
It took a long time coming. It had to be dragged out of him.
During this time, Munro was questioned over the Beaumonts, but police say there's no evidence linking him to the case. Andrew says even if they were only responsible for disposing of the bodies, his father and Munro must have known who was involved in the abduction and murder. Andrew's been concerned that since Max's death, his half-brother Danny has unwittingly destroyed some of their father's belongings.
We're just wondering why you're burning all your dad's stuff.
No, it's just wood, mate. I'm not saying a word.
Do you think Max had anything to do with the Beaumonts?
Absolutely not.
While police have investigated some of his claims, Andrew McIntyre says they've stopped listening.
He was a victim of Tony Munro's in 1965 and in 1966, at the time or around the time that the Beaumont children went missing. I think you've got to give him some credit, that you can't believe half his story and not the rest of the story.
Certainly, Max knew that Munro was abusing Andrew.
I caught him in bed with my son. They were bundled and naked. I didn't make a scene. He was a boy, a beautiful boy. He was my son, and he was in love with the Scoutmaster.
Andrew McIntyre says while his father will never face justice, it's not too late for others involved to be caught and punished.
All the evidence is out there. The witnesses are still alive, and we'd like to come forward and tell our story.
And we'll certainly let you know if police do follow up on those allegations. Mark Mooney with that report.
More than 100 soldiers training in the South Australian outback are preparing for war in Afghanistan. 7 News was there as they were put through their paces ahead of their deployment early next year.
At the Koltana training base, soldiers are firing up, counting down the days to deployment.
I feel everyone's a bit more prepared than what they thought they'd be, and everyone's just pretty excited to get over there and get it done.
Here, a convoy's patrolling an isolated stretch of road when suddenly an improvised explosive device goes off, leaving one of the vehicles damaged with casualties inside.
Holding, ready to receive!
As Taliban insurgents advance, help arrives and an intense firefight breaks out. It's a frightening insight into the reality facing our troops in Afghanistan.
Hands on the ground!
IEDs are still very prevalent within the Kabul area. You know, there's still the Taliban operating, plus other insurgency groups.
Down!
Here they have to extract a fellow soldier from a house filled with enemy fighters. When these soldiers from the 7th Battalion touch down in Kabul, they'll serve as guardian angels, protecting coalition soldiers against so-called green-on-blue attacks, where an Afghan soldier they're mentoring turns on them.
Been no update to the enemy intel.
Corporal Andrew Wastel knows how important the role is. He was there when a mentor was shot several years ago.
Came and attacked us with their M16 assault rifle.
2 men were hit before he took out the shooter.
The drills that we do here over and over and over again, It's just embedded, so when something like that happens, you work on instinct, you fall back onto your training.
Today, he's leading a training mission to transport a mentor in a convoy of armoured SUVs. It seems a simple task, but in a volatile country, every operation has to be carried out with care and precision. Just ask Private Cassandra Neal.
Dad, behind me!
Born in Adelaide, she's one of a handful of women who'll protect female mentors.
It's really good. The blokes treat the women just the same. Like, at the end of the day, we're all Australian soldiers.
For these soldiers who are now just 2 months from deployment, this is as close as their training gets to the real thing. Simulating scenarios like this is vital because when they get to Afghanistan, they'll face similar dangers every day.
But it's always exciting to go on deployment, regardless of how dangerous. You know, we're representing the Australian people, the Australian nation, and that's a great honour.
In Coltana, Mark Mooney, 7 News.